we're not taking time to process and debrief and integrate, then are we truly learning, or are we just trying to get by?
Decision fatigue is silently draining your team's potential. Today, we'll learn how to spot it, stop it, and lead smarter. Welcome to Lippincott Spark, Illuminating Nursing Education, the podcast that fuels teaching, innovation, and leadership. I'm Dr. Kelly Dries. Each episode, we spotlight bold ideas, expert voices, and practical strategies to help you teach smarter, lead stronger, and stay inspired. Let's spark new thinking and dive into today's episode. What if the resilient nursing leaders we admire are quietly burning out? Decision fatigue costs Fortune 500 companies up to $250 million a year, and nursing leadership is not immune. Today, we're exposing the hidden toll of high-functioning leadership and exploring how to lead with clarity, authenticity, and heart. Joining us today is Jen Adamson, nurse, leadership consultant, and international best-selling author and TEDx speaker. With a background in healthcare crisis leadership and Fortune 500 consulting, Jen helps organizations prevent burnout and transform high-functioning leaders into truly high-performing ones. Welcome, Jen. We're thrilled to have you today.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I am so excited to be here and to dive deep into this conversation today.
I had the pleasure of meeting you at the Nurse Educator Conference in the Rockies this past summer, and where you delivered an unforgettable keynote and attended my podium session, and we had a chance to chit-chat right after, and you were absolutely lovely, and I'm really excited about this conversation today.
I am so excited too, and I feel the same. I know when we connected a few weeks afterwards, it was like this mutual, synergistic, just honor to be in each other's presence, because I see so much of what your philosophy is very much aligned to my philosophy of leadership as well.
Let's start there. I would love to hear a little bit about your journey and what kind of experiences really shaped your passion for helping leaders connect deeply with their values and their unique strengths and really creating a lasting impact.
My journey is a windy road. As you know, a little bit in my biography, I have 16 plus years of experience in complex organizations that range from Fortune 500 consulting, working with the U.S. Armed Forces, government officials in advising, all the way to public relations, communications, campaigns, and even healthcare as a registered nurse who led 75 nurses on the front lines of COVID. And so I've learned a few things in the last few years of that experience, which is so diverse and so rich with so much I've learned, and I'm still learning. I think that's the key is to say is like, I'm still learning this process. I'm a student for life, and the world is my classroom. But what I have found that was a passion of mine is it started in consulting when I was helping executives and their teams to implement sustainable business practices. What we used to talk about then was this framework of the triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit. And I'd always tell my clients, of course I do care, but really your motivation to implementing sustainable business practices is up to you. But what's important is that you get clear on what that motivation is, because that's what's going to help carry you through and hit your goals and your results. But what I found to be so exciting and exhilarating for me was the people component, to see organizations who at first were struggling. Maybe they were functioning, maybe they were barely functioning. And then moving into coming on common ground and uniting on a single mission and uniting on a single vision that excited the entire team. I saw organizations' growth exponentially expand after even weeks. You'd see things, how communication was improving, how performance was improving. And, you continue to keep those consistent steps and you see bigger growth and bigger results, like more revenue, higher satisfaction among customers and stakeholders and investors. So it was just so fascinating to see how we can really create high-performing teams with just a few simple things, a few simple techniques. But this is really why I started my practice 5.5 years ago. I was on the front lines of COVID. We had one of the highest retention rates in one of the most hardest hit hospitals in the region. And I don't take all the credit. It was a team effort. But I was like, we have to start sharing this more because there is another way, there's another paradigm that we can live and work and operate in that actually opens the door to us flourishing and thriving rather than just surviving.
I'd love to unpack a powerful distinction you often make, and you kind of said it just before. You talk about the difference between high functioning and high performing leadership. So can you explain what that means and why it really matters?
Yes. I'm so glad you asked that question because this is something I love to bring people to the background and say, okay, let's peek behind the curtains and really dig deep and unpack this. So the first and most important thing to understand, again, is that high functioning, like you said, is different than high performing. They are not the same thing. Though we often confuse organizations, leaders will often confuse the two to be the same. So bringing it to nursing education, I think we can all agree that nursing in general has always demanded resilience. Right now, especially, the demand has hit a whole new level. We're struggling with staffing shortages, both in the academic world and in the clinical setting. As in the academic world, you guys have increased administrative tasks. And let's not forget the emotional load of supporting students and colleagues and teams through so much global and political uncertainty right now. So I know that many nurse educators and their leaders are operating in a chronic state of stress. So they're functioning. And sometimes beautifully so, right? Sometimes we can really get stuff done, but it's coming at a cost. And it's not coming just simply at a cost to themselves. It's a systematic cost that over time can create this ripple effect where it trickles down into the classrooms and students and upstream as well to leadership and teams. And so we all know that this pace and this pressure is not sustainable. But I want to take a look underneath the surface just for a moment because I want to make it like, that sounds great, Jen, but what are you exactly talking about? Stress alone is not a bad thing. When we have our sympathetic nervous system activated, that fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode, that kicks in. And in short bursts, it's actually helpful, right? Because the cortisol and the epinephrine and the adrenaline, they can help us jump into action real fast. So I like to think of it as if a patient codes on the floor, that sympathetic nervous system is firing and it gets the nurses and the doctors and the entire treatment team to jump in and spring into action and create coordinated action. But the thing is it's only good for a certain amount of time. So maybe 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. But over time, under a chronic load of cortisol and adrenaline and all those stress hormones coursing through our body, we then can start to burn out. So it's like it can sharpen focus, it can heighten our awareness, and it can help us in those critical moments. But our bodies and our brains are not designed to withstand that for a chronic state, for a prolonged period of time. So I like to say 20-minute code, great. We can get a lot done and we can save the patient. Imagine if the doctor said, let's do this for 5 hours. We don't want to do that. That's dangerous and it's dangerous on all fronts as well. So we're just not designed to function. And that's where high functioning is usually they're operating under that sense of urgency, that sense of stress, that code blue energy day after day after day after day. They might be getting a lot done, but it's not sustainable.
And that's what we experienced during COVID and even after, right? In terms of for leaders in academia trying to get hundreds of students through clinicals when your clinical sites have actually shut down or said, I'm sorry, you can't come here because of what we're dealing with the pandemic, and, talk about high stress situations for a prolonged period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a little bit to add to that. It's like we understand that we're going to face these critical times in our lives. Like you had mentioned COVID and how that totally changed the entire world. It changed so many systems and so many paradigms. And I think the important thing to understand is one of the first key steps to a high performing team is actually having the awareness that, okay, this is not necessarily normal. This is not something we can function on for a super long period of time. But, COVID, I look at it, that was like a 2.5 year long crisis in the healthcare world. And we were still able, by building systems and communicating and bringing that self-awareness as leaders, we were able to sustain that chronic state of heightened stress by almost equalizing it or creating an equilibrium where we were giving our employees time to rest and ensuring that they weren't taking overtime. So there is a possibility, if there's ever a team that's like, well, we're in that state right now and it's urgent and we don't know when the timeline is, when this will end, there are ways that you can sprinkle this in and weave it in so that you are still high performing.
That's a fascinating insight, I think. And now let's talk about the financial impact. Decision fatigue is costing organizations millions. So what is decision fatigue? And can you give us an example of how this shows up in schools of nursing or healthcare organizations?
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate you asking that question. I want to share with you something that really guides high-performing teams so that they are in a flow state. It's really about capacity management and managing their energy strategically. And they do three things really well. They know when to downshift and when to accelerate. They know when to rest and to acclimate. And they know how to minimize what I say are the biggest drains on leadership effectiveness, the IDO, indecision, decision fatigue, and overthinking. And this is, like you said, quietly costing our organizations and even the academic world millions upon millions of dollars, especially because we're losing talent as a result of it. We're losing energy, we're losing focus, and we're losing a lot of innovation. And so, yes, I have an example. I worked with a program director at a mid-sized nursing school, and she was making onwards of hundreds of decisions weekly, small decisions and big decisions. It was like one fire after another, after another, after another. And this was just work, right? Let's also look at the human being holistically. We don't exist in a vacuum. We all have personal lives, whether we have families or we're taking care of someone, or, there's always those things that are playing in the background that also lend to a heightened level of stress. And so she was overwhelmed, rightfully so, by all of these decisions she was having to make. Approving adjunct hires, working on clinical rotations, answering student crises. And what she was finding herself doing was starting to shut down, starting to almost like, oh, this is so much. It's almost like we get past burnout, we start to check out or we start to numb out. And it was causing her to avoid making the really critical decisions. And what ended up happening, unfortunately so, we were able to rectify this over some time. But what ended up happening is that 2 faculty members did resign. And there was increasingly an influx of complaints among students. And it makes total sense. And there is no judgment, right? We have to learn how to set up the systems both organizationally and personally and in the classroom so that we can succeed, because it's not possible for us to be making hundreds. To me, in my personal opinion, I don't think we're designed. Our bodies, our brains, our minds, our nervous systems are not designed to be making hundreds or even dozens of big and small decisions at a rapid pace. We have to have time and we have to create those systems and put those in place. Really, to me, it's a clutter problem. It's a need to understand what's important, what do we prioritize, and how are we going to be agile enough to reprioritize given situations and circumstances that in the environments that we are in.
And I think about, I had worked with a leader as well that was in probably the same boat and having a really difficult time prioritizing because there were so many decisions to be made. And like you said, they could be very minuscule and then some very, very big decisions that really have a significant impact on the program. Not only the students, but the faculty. And I remember her, it was almost like you could see her just swirling. And I remember sitting down with her and I said, how can I help you? And it was like she didn't even know where to begin because she was so overwhelmed and so stressed. And I said, okay, and Jen, you might have heard me say this before. It's like you need your own board of directors. Who are your confidants? Who is a mentor to you? Who is somebody who you can bounce ideas off of? And at that point, I said, okay, give me the list of things you need to make decisions on. Let's prioritize them. And it was like this laser focus of this is what we're going to start with. This is what's next. And kind of create your own little care plan of how are you going to mitigate some of these things. And at that point, it was kind of digging out of that hole and, getting that breath of fresh air, like, okay, we got this. But it took a team. It took a team of people, not just that one person. Because at the end of the day, sometimes being a leader can be a little bit lonely. I'm just going to say it like that, where you feel like it's all on your shoulders. But if you have people that you can rely on and to, again, bounce things off of, it just makes the load a little bit easier to carry.
I couldn't agree more, Kelly. First of all, how lucky she is, how fortunate she is to have a leader like you cheering her on and in her corner, because I don't think a lot of leaders are aware. It's knowing what to look out for. And I love, not that I love this for her, but what I want to say is I love that you mentioned that she at first didn't know, because that's so common. I know when I was a charge nurse, I would do the same thing. I would say, what can I help you with? And I get it, because I've been in those shoes before where it's like, I'm so overwhelmed. I can't even begin to tell you where I need help because I don't even know. And so I think one of the things that we can do as leaders is be aware once you now know, okay, maybe we are high functioning. Maybe we have been in the functioning modality and in survival mode for a little too long. Is I think the importance of consistently checking in with your team and consistently checking in with your employees and not being afraid to keep asking. And I would always tell my nurses, I'm going to be kind of annoying and I'm going to keep checking in because I want to make sure that you know that you are supported. And if I can't help you, I'm going to find the resources and we're going to delegate this and we're going to get more people involved so that we can disperse this responsibility a little bit more, because it shouldn't all be on your shoulders.
And I love that solution, kind of shifting to those solutions of, when you're stressed nursing leader, what can you do tomorrow to begin that transition from the high functioning to high performing, and checking in with people. And I always think in order to do that, you yourself have to have high situational awareness. You need to take pause and to look at your team and to kind of read the room and say, okay, is this the time where I need to turn down the temperature a little? Do I need to turn it up a little? We've got accreditation coming, so it's all hands on deck, but I also need to turn it down so they don't get burned out, right? So do you have any other solutions that might shepherd somebody to that high performing state?
Yes, Kelly, I do. So it's not a framework that I can take credit for, but as an entrepreneur for the last 6 years, I've had to learn a few things about how to manage my time, how to lead teams of my own, as well as manage the high demands that my clients bring, the high stakes situations that they bring that I can help them work through and navigate through. So I want to give credit to it's Amazon and it's Jeff Bezos. It was always something that in the back of my mind myself, I knew about, but now I have words thanks to this framework. And he calls it the type 1 and the type 2 decisions. Have you ever heard of this framework before?
No. Love to learn more.
It's incredibly simplified. For me, when I heard it, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. Of course, it's not a silver bullet. There are going to be, as you go deeper, depending on the complexities of the organizational situations that you're facing or in the classroom that you're facing, but it is a nice way to lay the groundwork to create that foundation. So what I call is we want to triage our cognitive energy by deciding, is this a type 1 decision or a type 2 decision? So type 1 decisions you can look at them as they're irreversible and they're high stakes. If we make this decision, it's going to be a lot more difficult for us to pivot or to backpedal or backtrack. So when we are facing a type 1 decision, the key mantra to say is to think deeply, to take your time, to take the space, to really hash things out and look at things from a variety of perspectives. This is when you kind of go in and you have the brainstorming sessions with your team. So these can be in nursing education. Examples can be the final approval of a program accreditation strategy. It can be hiring new faculty members or tenure track faculty members. It can be changing clinical partner contracts. These could all fall under potentially type 1 decisions. And these deserve your freshest brain. So I always say schedule them at your highest energy times. For me, that's morning. They did a study where they found judges made more favorable rulings earlier in the day compared to later in the day when they made so many decisions and had so many cases. So play with that and get really clear on where our highest energy times as a team or as an individual, if it's a type 1 personal decision, and make those decisions as early as you possibly can in the day if that's in alignment with you. Type 2 are the reversible decisions. They're the low stakes decisions. They're the ones where if we make this decision, we can easily backpedal or pivot. So I like to say the easiest way to understand this is let's not waste our time thinking about what we're going to wear in the morning and what we're going to eat. Let's get those out of our mind and not worry about that so much because we have a big team meeting in a couple hours and where we're going to have to face those type 1 decisions. So type 2 are act quickly or automate, and in some cases, even delegate. These decisions can be tested and they can always be adjusted later. So examples could be setting a deadline for homework assignments in your classroom, or the location of a seminar, or the order of lecture slides. Let's not get inundated by some of these smaller type 2 decisions that can take up so much mental, cognitive space and bandwidth in our minds that then decreases our capacity to be able to make the higher stakes decisions. The problem is what I will see often among leaders is that they're treating type 1 decisions as type 2 and they're going in real fast. It's possible. Or vice versa. They're treating the type 2 decisions as type 1 and really taking a long time to decide, okay, how am I going to delegate these emails and respond to these emails? It's bringing that awareness. And I think to tie this all in and put it in a pretty package is to emphasize how important it is to give ourselves some space on a consistent basis. And that doesn't mean that we have to sit on top of a mountain and meditate for 5 hours. I don't have time for that.
Definitely.
But it's about how can I provide space, mental clarity and space throughout my day. So the way I like to describe it is if I'm picking up a shift at the hospital and I know it's going to be a busy day, what am I telling myself on the drive to the hospital? It's like those little steps. What music am I listening to? Am I doing things to regulate my nervous system before I even step on the floor? And then how am I, if a nurse or maybe a patient gives me a weird look or says something kind of snarky, how do I want to take that? Is that worth my energy and time? Is that something, sometimes maybe it is. Maybe it is if you need to nip that in the bud and it's a pattern. But I don't know. I found most of the times it's, they've had a hard day. Let me relate to them and understand that snarky comment had nothing to do with me in the first place. And I'm learning how to horseback ride. And my trainer says, be Dorian and let that kind of slide off your back. Just kind of forget that.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, let it go. Jen, you've worked with both healthcare and corporate leaders. So what patterns have you seen emerge across these industries? And how does the corporate athlete model uniquely apply to nursing leadership in high stress environments?
Yeah, I am still geeking out on this whole framework. It's fascinating to me. I was first introduced to it about 2 years ago, and there's so many different nuances. They have a pyramid and they talk about how we have to be able to flow through these different pyramids. And it really starts off I'm not going to get it completely right, but they talk about how we have to, almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we have to meet our basic needs first. We have to feel safe at home in our bodies, personally, professionally. Then it moves into emotional. Am I feeling fulfilled emotionally in most or all areas of my life? And then it moves up to even the spiritual needs, the purpose. Why am I doing this in the first place? Why is this important to me? That's big, because that's what helps us, our ties and connection to our why and our purpose, personally and professionally, is what helps carry us through the hard times and the difficult times and the unprecedented times. And so then it's this ability to be able to almost oscillate or flow through and understand, we are not perfect human beings. So it's not a matter of getting this perfect, but it's a matter of practicing this. And they mentioned that, the top athletes in the world, this was so fascinating to me. I just want to share this little bit. They're mostly practicing, and only a portion of their time is actually performing. And in that practice, they're also the biggest catalyst to their growth is not hustling through the practice and never stopping, but it's about taking time to rest their muscles. Like as let's get down to the physical. If we take that example of exercising our muscles, we need stress. We need to induce that stress of weightlifting to build that muscles. But if we continue to keep going and never take breaks, we're going to injure ourselves. But if we give ourselves 24 to 48 hours between the next workout, those microfibers create, those little tears, those micro tears in our muscles, and then they repair, and then the muscles grow stronger. And so it's like taking these little pieces of intelligence of the natural world and understanding that we can start to integrate this in our lives as well.
It kind of leads to that recovery as a strategy, that leaders need to build that into their day, how they're able to build that resilience and that recovery. Because again, you have decision fatigue and a lot of things going on. So why is structured recovery so critical for sustaining that high performance in your mind?
Because that is where the growth happens. Because if we're not taking time to process and debrief and integrate, then are we truly learning, or are we just trying to get by? Are we really learning to embody the highest potential that we have? Are we really tapping into our greatest human potential if we're just trying to rush through every day and trying to get by and putting out fires? I think the biggest question I always like to ask my leaders is who do you want to be? And that means, who do you want to be in this moment now? Who do you want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And that can be the compass or the North Star that guides how we make those decisions, whether it's in this given day, in this given moment, and also longer term.
What trends do you see shaping the future of nursing and leadership and well-being? If you had your crystal ball, what are you seeing?
Ooh, I wish I had a crystal ball. First of all, that would be so wonderful. I really think that a lot of people are starting to understand this. As out there as this might sound, I think we are all starting to awaken a little bit more to the importance of almost the softer things in life, and understanding that it's all complementary. The strategy, the playbooks, the milestones, that's important, and we don't want to lose sight of that. But what is the impact we want to make in this process? And I always like to think, do we want to have some fun while we're doing this as well? Or do we just really want it all just be serious and have this feel a bit like a drag? And when I really have the conversations with leaders and decision makers, they're like, no, we spend, I don't know what the statistic is, 70, 80% of our lives, I'm going to guess, in the workplace. So why wouldn't we want this to be a place of transformation and a place of community and a place where it isn't just kept in the workplace, but then creates this ripple effect in our families and in our communities. And if we can all support each other in this, I think that we can make a bigger difference than we even realize.
Thank you for that. As we wrap up this conversation today, I'd love to invite you to share one final spark, with our listeners. What inspirational message or maybe a moment of reflection or piece of wisdom would you like to leave with us?
I want to share something that happened about a year and a half ago. I was filling in for a friend of mine for a shift so that she could actually be at her son's soccer game. And I remember when I do, I'll work occasionally a shift a few times a month, and I'm always excited. I'm like, what's going to happen today? Who am I going to get to meet today? Who are my patients going to be? And I met this very sweet, kind of grumpy elderly patient. I think he was in his 80s or 90s. We kind of had he had this sarcastic humor, and we kind of had this witty banter back and forth. But what I realized is, at first he kind of showed up grumpy and he was a little bit resistant. But what I realized is as I continued to just be myself, and he was a little bit more open, and he began to open up a little bit more, and he shared a little bit about his life. And I love when patients do this. And he mentioned to me that he was a very successful restaurant owner. He had a couple different restaurants that he had owned. And I asked him, I was like, that's so interesting. I've worked in the restaurant business myself. It was one of my first jobs. It's a hard job.
Mine too.
Yeah. Exactly. And he agreed. He said, I worked myself here, essentially. I worked nonstop. And he continued to push for the next thing. And he admitted to me that he had burnt out. And what I realized, Kelly, as the shift went on, I realized that this sweet patient of mine had no visitors. And when I started to ask around, because I float to different hospitals, so I never keep really the same patient more than once, I had asked some of the other nursing and CNAs, and they had all said, no, he's been here for a few days and he hasn't had any visitors. It made my heart sad. It made me really sad, because here was this man who had worked incredibly hard, but he had sacrificed so much. He even admitted to me that his wife and his children were estranged, and he hadn't spoken to them for years. And it made me pause and wonder about this very thing. Who do we want to be? Going back to that question, what is the legacy we want to leave? And the sad truth to me is that burnout doesn't bring the best in us. It brings out the worst. And it made me think about, if we were that one in the hospital bed, who would be standing by our sides? Would the room be filled? And would it be filled with love and support and people rallying behind us? Or would it be filled with people that weren't so supportive or arguing? Or would the room be empty? I know these are hard questions that can be a little vulnerable and uncomfortable to ask ourselves, but I think they are important questions, because they can be our guiding star in how we choose to show up and how we decide and how we make the decisions that we're making today. So my spark is don't wait until the end to realize what truly matters. Decide now, build your legacy personally and professionally. When it's your time, I can guarantee if you do that, your room will be full, and it will be full not just of people, but of love too.
Thank you so much for sharing your powerful insights and your heartfelt wisdom with us today. I love that story. So, today we've uncovered the hidden cost of high functioning leadership and explored the strategic power of recovery and learned what it truly means to lead with the heart. So thanks again, Jen, and it's been a true pleasure. Thanks for listening to Lippincott Spark. Be sure to subscribe, share with a colleague, and leave us a 5-star review. You'll find links below to learn more about Lippincott nursing products and services. Until next time, keep learning, keep leading, and keep sparking innovation in nursing education.